I want to bring in one of our go-to experts on the war in Ukraine, retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, a senior fellow and military expert with defense priorities. President Biden added himself to the long list of world leaders to visit Kyiv today. Why go now?
I think that it's really just a matter of convenience that it happens to be number one around the anniversary of the kickoff of the war, and then number two, he was going to be in Poland tomorrow to give a very high-profile speech. So it actually was pretty easy to just make this diversion down there. Well, I mean, easy in terms of time, but pretty complicated in terms of the coordination going into the war zone. There was definitely some risk there, but I think that's probably the reason and the timing.
What kind of message does President Biden's visit send to Russia?
You know, I don't think it really sends any message to Russia. The only thing that it might help is certainly the Ukraine people to maybe feel better about their cause. That the world is paying attention, and that the president of the United States, who's, frequently seen as the leader of the free world, came to visit them in person. But I mean, look, from the Russian side, they already know that we're, certainly all in to help Ukraine against them. And that didn't change any of this. So I don't think they got much of a message on that one.
Okay, they didn't get a message, but they did get a little bit of a heads up that he was headed to Kyiv. Is it out of the norm for the U.S. to tell Russia about the president's trip before he landed?
Yeah, I mean, everything about this is out of the norm, and that's just another part of it, but it was absolutely necessary. They could not take any chance that, the Russians, even, by mistake, saw a plane flying in the Ukrainian airspace, or maybe decided to, take that time to hit a rail bridge or something that the president's train came on. The odds, the chances were too high that there could be a mistake, and the consequences of that would be catastrophic. Because, of course, then you'd have the potential for, an active war that could turn nuclear in a heartbeat. So I think it was something we absolutely had to do. And Russia is in their own self-interest not to take any action, negatively. So it was in their interest to let this go, but it was definitely important to have it coordinated.
There have been reports China may provide military aid to Russia. Does the president's visit to Kyiv, coupled with a strong message from the Secretary of State, send a subtle or maybe not so subtle message to Beijing to back off?
Well, I don't think there's anything subtle about our messaging. I mean, the fact that Secretary Blinken was very blunt and outspoken, saying that if we have intelligence that they're thinking about giving lethal aid to Moscow and that there would be severe consequences if they chose to do so. I think that was, a shot across the bow. But look, we got to recognize we have limited influence when it comes to China, as we've seen on a number of cases. And we already have, lots of sanctions against them. And we have, elements of a trade war, et cetera, and all this. And we also obviously have a big amount of trade going. So we can't, put that in jeopardy. But China also has to be careful how they navigate this difficult situation, because they don't want to see Russia fall, because they need that as a counterweight to us. But they also can't go too far, because if we do put some sanctions on them, that could hurt their economy, which is really important to the China Communist Party.
Yeah, I mean, quite the line to walk, regardless of what party you're looking at there. From a military standpoint, what does Ukraine's next move have to be if it wants to drive Russia out? What do you think?
Well, look, I think a little realism here is in order. And Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Milley, about a month or so ago, said point blank that he saw no path militarily for Ukraine to drive Russia out this year. And I completely agree with that assessment. There is no military path to do it. One of the big reasons is because, we've just offered quite a large number of tanks and armored personnel carriers and anti-aircraft missiles across the West. But those things aren't going to arrive in any number until the mid to late summer, some of it not until 2024. So what Ukraine has to do right now is that they've got to weather the storm that's coming from Russia in this, the offensive that's going on right now, along with presumably a big shot that's going to come maybe within days.
Is a victory still within Russia's grasp?
Right now, I don't think so. I don't think either side has a real clear path to a military victory. Maybe it's definitely more on Russia's side than Ukraine, but even that comes with some big caveats. Evgeny Prigozhin of the Wagner Group, I think, was pretty honest last week when he said that it would probably take Russia a year and a half just to take the Donbass. And I think that probably when it gets around toward the end of this year, maybe the beginning of next, you might see both sides finally saying, hey, there's not a path militarily to this that could meet either side's ends, and then they may be willing to make a negotiation, whereas right now neither side is.
To that point, let's ask you, Ukraine's president said he would not negotiate away any territory. What would a peace deal wind up looking like?
Yeah, look, I mean, that's what he says right now, and who's to blame him? I mean, I certainly would probably be saying the same thing if I were in his shoes. But the reality at some point may, step in that it's not on the cards. It's not a realistic possibility. And if he comes to the point to where he realizes it doesn't matter how much weaponry he gets from the West, it doesn't matter how many troops he loses, he might not even be able to hold on to all he has, much less to go and actually drive Russia out. That is such a high bar to meet. And I can tell you, someone who's conducted armored offensive operations, it is much more difficult than what people think, especially if you're starting from when you're already been invaded and you're trying to defend at the same time you're trying to form an offensive capacity. So I think that if President Zelensky gets to the point to where he realizes that continuing to fight is only going to cause him to lose more, then he may change his view. But right now, he's not there.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, thank you so much for your context, your insight, and bringing in your own experience here to kind of shed some light on what may be going on right now. Appreciate it.
Always my pleasure. Thanks for having me.